Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hi, and welcome back to this week's episode of Journey Forward with Jory Rose. Before jumping into my conversation with Terry Real, I'd like to invite you to my virtual retreat taking place September 18th through 22nd. This 5-day free transformational experience is going to consist of morning meditations as well as evening conversations with different guest experts. It is designed to help you cultivate satisfaction in all areas of your life. The link is in the show notes, and once again, it's free, and I know it's going to be an amazing week. I look forward to seeing you there. Enjoy this episode. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I am deeply honored to have my guest on today, Terry Real, who has been one of my personal heroes in the work of a therapist. And I am so grateful that you have spent some time with me today, Terry. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you. It's a joy to be here with you.
So, Terry, I have always been fascinated by relationship. And even from the time I was super young, I actually started dating my ex-husband when I was 13 years old. And at the time, it really worked. And I was always fascinated by the question, what makes some relationships work and what makes some relationships not work? And even at 13, 14, 15 years old, that always drove me knowing that would be what my profession was going to turn into, with that curiosity. What was your journey? How did you know you were going to become, or did you know that you wanted to become a therapist working with relationships? How did you get to where you are?
Oh my gosh. Well, my somewhat New York wise ass answer is I started off my job as a family therapist about the age 4 in my dysfunctional family. A million years ago, Alice Miller wrote about the drama of the gifted child, and the gift when you come from a dysfunctional family is EQ. The gift is being able to read these towering figures that you depend upon and actually do what you can to regulate them because you need them to be
survival, right?
Yeah, right. And so I always and this is true of a lot of kids. I as I've written about, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family with a raging dad who was emotionally and at times physically violent, a pretty disconnected mom. And I had a kind of a nascent spirituality that I spent a lot of time alone, away from that house as much as I could in the woods, and I felt connected to something. And one of the graces of my childhood, and this may be gendered, it may have helped that I'm a man, a male. I didn't feel a lot of shame. I didn't feel this was my fault. I thought they were goddamn crazy, and I was doing time. I was putting in my 18-year jail sentence.
That's quite a self-awareness for you to recognize at a young age that it wasn't about you. That's so hard for so many kids to be able to tap into and not take personally or over attached to something is wrong with them. What's wrong with me?
I know. Well, it's safer. It is an inevitable for most people because it's more terrifying for a young person to say, I'm in a universe where the people who are supposed to be protecting me actually attack me for reasons I'll never understand. That's more dangerous, the feeling, than I'm a bad person, I did something wrong to deserve this. ergo sum, if I learn how to be a good person, I can control it.
Right.
So, and I think now that I say it, I think there's something about my little childish spirituality and that realization that go hand in hand. I knew I couldn't control it. I knew it wasn't me. I've been to other families and I've seen other people not behave like that. Um, and so I did what I could with my family, but like a lot of kids from families like this, I mostly survived by staying the hell away. I was
Yeah.
very good at getting adopted by healthier families in the
You were
neighborhood.
seeking connection, right?
Yeah, yeah. And we know from kids with a lot of trauma like this, it doesn't take much. One or two stable, loving figures in their lives are enough to get them by.
Sure.
And that's how I so anyway. So then I like to say I didn't start off as a therapist. I started off as a writer. I
Mm.
spent 4 years in a PhD program in literature, and I wrote a bunch of novels that I didn't try and get published. And then I moved to Boston. I drove a cab, and I became a therapist because I was getting shot at in the cab. Um, and
Much safer profession.
yeah, it's so it seemed. And the minute I don't know how it was for you, Jory, but the minute I sat down in the role play therapist chair on the first day of my training, uh, I knew what to do.
Hmm.
I knew what to do in a way that I hadn't known what to do in 4 years of
Mm.
literature. I just knew what to do, and it's like, okay, this is what I'm
Well,
gonna have
it's
to
like
do.
tapping into that innate spirituality or inner wisdom that you found in the woods in that time alone, right? That self-reflection tapped into what I think many people are disconnected from is that intuition and inner wisdom.
I think that's right. I think you're right. And I didn't write again for 25 years.
Wow.
I actually went to therapy to give up being a writer and to embrace.
How'd that work out for you, Terry?
Well, it was okay.
Yeah.
What I say is that I went to therapy
Now you got
school.
to do both.
Well, eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
But I went to therapy school to get skilled enough to have the conversation that I had at 25 with my dad that I needed to have to not become. And we did have that conversation, and I did do some individual healing, and then I went to family therapy training to learn how to have a relationship because I had no idea.
Well, and that's the hard part, right? For so many people who come from dysfunctional, trauma informed families, dysfunctional with emotions enmeshment, we don't have that role model.
No, no. And one of the things that distinguishes the school of therapy I've created, relational life therapy, is a tripart therapy, three phases. The first is loving confrontation. Jury, this is what you're doing that will blow your foot off every time. This is what
Mm-hmm.
we call a dysfunctional relational stance. This is the stance you keep repeating, like angry pursuit is a dysfunctional stance. You'll
Mm-hmm.
never get more of what you want by complaining to your partner
Right.
about what. So the first thing is, this is what you're doing that has to change. The second thing is, where did you learn this from?
Right.
And we do deep trauma work in the couples therapy. We go back to your childhood. And then the third is skills. Let me teach you how to do it better. And you're right. Most of us didn't learn relational skills in our families. We certainly didn't learn it in the culture. So we have to learn it now.
And it takes so much courage to do the trauma work, right? To have that wound be reopened in the face of trying to connect with our partner in the present. It's amazing any relationship works out, actually. I always get fascinated by this. There's so many, components stacked up against And I always say love isn't enough. And we all think love is enough. Well, but I love him. He's such a great person. She's so wonderful. If only you met her. And yet intimacy is an entirely different ballgame.
Yeah, we've never wanted more from relationships than we do right now. I mean, this is historically new. We
Right.
never wanted to be lifelong lovers. And passionate relationships were adulterous in Western civilization. Just look at Western literature from the
Yeah.
Middle Ages on up. That nobody talked about a hot, passionate marriage until today. Now we want to be lifelong lovers, but we don't have a sophisticated skill set. This culture that we live in is not a relationship cherishing culture. We
Mm-hmm.
give lip service to it, but we don't really treasure it. And we don't teach our kids the skills you need to pull off being a lifelong lover. Skills like how to stand up for yourself and be loving to your partner in the same breath.
Mm-hmm.
How to listen to your partner when they're unhappy with you and help them get happy with you. Which is called repair. How to cherish the relationship, what to do when you're in what we call the wise adult part of you. You're centered and you're okay, but your partner's being a 4-year-old and
Mm-hmm.
being out of it. These are basic skills that we teach everybody. But nobody in our culture knows how to do any of those things. They have to learn.
No. Well, and the focus of the work I do as a therapist is really grounded in mindfulness. And to me, mindfulness is at the root of being able to do any of those skills. Like if we can't regulate ourselves, then we're not going to be able to stand up in that fierce intimacy that you talk about, right? Or be able to have that loving, compassionate confrontation if we're not able to recognize when we're dysregulated, how to be able to get there. So there's multi-layered skills to even, attend to these once we recognize that's what we need to do.
Well, what you're talking about, I have a name for. I have a name for everything. I call this relational mindfulness. Speaking of
It's
mindfulness,
perfect. Yeah.
I say to when I lecture in the spiritual community, it's great to be spiritual and mindful on the pillow, but try being spiritual and mindful when your partner's in the kitchen screaming at you for being a loser.
Yep.
Be mindful then. And the trick is, you know my work. You know I'm going to say that. The most important question I have as a relational therapist is not what are the stressors. A good couple can handle stress, and it's not even what's the choreography. The more he pursues, the more he distances. The more he distances. That's really important. But the most important question is which part of you am I speaking to? Am I
Mm-hmm.
speaking to what the neurobiologists know as the prefrontal cortex, the wise adult part of you here and now? Or am I speaking to fight or flight, flooded, trauma reactive
Right.
subcortical parts of your brain? And these parts of your brain literally don't have it in them to remember a relationship.
Yeah.
So the first order of business is when you're triggered, take a breath or 10, take a time out. Go to my website. I have the 10 commandments of how to take a time out. Take a break, physically remove yourself if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Get re-centered. I call it remembering love. Remember the person you're talking to is someone you care about, and the reason why you're speaking is to make things better. And if you're not in that part of you, which is the most mature part of the brain,
Right.
if you're in a more triggered part of you, that's okay. Just be honest with yourself and shut the hell up.
Yeah.
Don't make a mess of things. Walk around the block, talk to that little boy or girl. Do a little work with that triggered part of you. And then when you're in the part of you that wants to make things better with your partner, then go back into the fray. But the first order of business is understanding the triggered, traumatized parts of us don't want to use skills. They don't want to be
Right.
intimate.
They
They
can't even
want
access them. Right.
no. They want to be protected. Self-protection is the name of the game, not intimacy. So, I have a saying: you can be right or you can be married. What's more important?
Mm-hmm.
You ask what I call the adaptive child part of you, the part of you that coped when you were little. the answer is being right is much more important than being
Right.
right. So you have to get mindful. You have to ask yourself, somebody said, wait, why am I talking? But what am I about in this moment right now? What am I about? Am I
Yeah.
really talking to someone I care about to make things better? Or am I going to try and pound this sucker into the ground or prove I'm right or ventilate or figure out what part of you is up and self-regulate before you try and work on the relationship.
And that dynamic is so hard. And having experienced that with my partner, there would be times where he was good at that, at recognizing, oh, I don't want to say something I don't mean, so I'm going to create some space, which would trigger my abandonment, cause me that anxious attachment. So it was a recognition of when is an opportunity for co-regulation and when do we need self-regulation, right? Because those were moments where I really sought for him to co-regulate me, but he wasn't available for that. And that was
Yeah,
another level of deep work to
this
recognize
idea of co-regulation is tricky because
it is.
regulating you is not my responsibility, and I differ
Mm-hmm.
from some couples therapists in that regard. But I do have responsibility to the relationship, to the biosphere. I'm not in charge of your psyche, but I do my job in doing what I can to deal with what happens between us. So, for example, you don't just say, I'm going to take a break, see ya. You tell your partner in advance that this, when I get flooded, this is what I'm going to do. Is that okay with you? When I leave, I will check back in with you 30 minutes, an hour, 3 hours. There are intervals. If you go to my
Mm-hmm.
web and download the Ten Commandments, taking time out, they're prescribed. So it's what I call responsible distance taking. Here's,
Mm-hmm.
here's why, dear partner, I'm not just slamming out here. And here's when I'm coming back.
That coming back piece, that helps me regulate. And that's such an important piece that many people don't know to add. So I love that you reiterate that, because that is almost enough to get to regulation when you are facing this confrontation, this challenge.
Right, right. And that's what I mean when I talk about learning a skill. Nobody spontaneously knows how to take care of their partner while they're taking distance. You have to learn that. I would have to say to your partner, listen, you have some abandonment issues, which means that it's hard for you to tell the difference between a break and a rupture.
Mm-hmm.
So help her out by reassuring her that this is not a rupture. You'll be back. Here's why you're leaving. Here's the deal. Settle it all, not in the heated moment, but before the heated moment.
Right.
So, so these are all good examples of thinking relationally, standing up for
Mm-hmm.
yourself, taking care of your partner at the same time, which is new. The culture doesn't teach us that. In
Yeah.
patriarchal, you can either stand up for yourself or you can be related, but doing both at the same time is brand new territory.
It really is. And you describe that so beautifully in your books. And I got first introduced to you when I was in couples therapy at the end of my marriage, a little over 10 years ago, with the book New Rules of Marriage. And that was really helpful to read, even though we decided not to continue the marriage, because, go figure, someone who you're with at 13, 14 years old is not, growing always in the same trajectory in your mid 30s. And that's okay. And one of the things that I have absolutely loved and talked so much about with my clients over the years is the book, How Can I Get Through to You? And the way that I sum up that book, I'll describe this to my clients in the way of, women are unhappy with their husbands because they want them to be more present, more aware, more compassionate, more vulnerable, more affectionate, more communicative. And men are unhappy with their women because their women are unhappy with them. And, that just, it sums it up so beautifully. But as a therapist, one of the things I'm fascinated with, and you mentioned something a moment ago, is your ability to be really challenging the paradigm that a therapist stays neutral. in the session. And I love seeing that example. And yet as a female, it's a little bit difficult for me, especially if I have a husband who comes in who's being dragged in. No, not everyone wants to be there willingly. And I fear if I were to be that confrontational, it would feel like he's been ganged up by now two women. And you being a male have maybe a little bit more alliance with the generalized husband who doesn't want to be there. Where did you gain that courage to be so confrontational? Because it really goes against some traditional, which I think antiquated models of therapy are ready to be written anyway. But how did you adopt that stance? Because it's powerful and courageous at times.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, let me just say something, go back to what you were saying. I do have a privilege and an advantage as a man. And I'm not shy about using. I'll take any advantage I can get. And most RLT therapists, like most therapists in general, are women. 90% of RLT therapists are women, and they're all running around confronting these guys and doing it really skillfully. There's an art to how to do it. We call it joining through the truth. You reach into that best part of the guy. And you look him in the eye and you go, look, you're a good guy. And you're a good guy who has been cheating and lying in your marriage for the last 20 years. How about you let me rescue the good guy you are from this crap? And we call that joining through the truth. You form an alliance with the best part of the person to deal with
That's
the
beautiful.
Grandiose adaptations. It's you and me dealing with that so you don't make such a damn mess of your life. And you know what? You do that. We teach you how to do that in my program. You do that well. It doesn't matter if you're man, woman, non-binary.
Right.
You could be sitting there in full drag, and the guy will listen to you. What they say is competence trumps gender.
Yeah.
If you're a female therapist and you look a guy like this dead in the eye, and you go, "You are going down for the count, man. You are drowning. Here's a lifeline. You want it? They'll take it." But the hard part, and I've trained a ton of therapists. The hard part for women is getting out of their own socialization and stepping into that level of power.
Yeah.
But women can do it. Pia Melody, one of my great mentors, I used to call her a cowgirl. And she looked into the eyes of a guy, one of these guys, and she said to him, now, what you're doing right now, she would say, is what we call coming on like a garlic mouthwash. Or my wife, who deals with male sex addicts. So she's got so the only woman doing a group with male sex addicts.
Wow.
And she'll say to a guy, I got to tell you, speaking as a woman, what you just said is disgusting. So don't be shy. The issue is what we call leverage. Do you have something that they want? And do you stand between something and some negative consequence they don't want?
Yeah.
And you're clear about, I've got something in my back pocket that makes it worth your while to listen to me. That trumps what they'll play the card. Oh, you two women.
Yeah.
But you don't care. Anyway, so I wanted to do that. In terms of my own, for 50 years, we therapists have been obsessed and done a great job of helping people come up from the one down of shame. We've done a horrible job of helping people come down from the one up of grandiosity, superiority, entitlement, content.
That was one of the questions I had submitted was, how do you deal with the one-up man? How do you get them back down, especially when they're narcissists or if they're narcissists?
Yeah, well, a narcissist just means that somebody doesn't like you very much. Listen, we live in a selfish culture. I prefer grandiose and selfish to the word narcissist. But the way you get somebody down is, first of all, leverage. This is what's going to happen to you if you don't come down. Grandiosity impairs judgment. Think about mania and bipolar disorder. Mania is like nature's crack grandiosity. We have to lock people up because they think they can fly and stuff. So it impairs, and two things. It impairs the empathy. The more grandiose someone is, the less empathic they are. And it impairs a correct assessment of negative consequences.
Yeah.
This is what happened to you. So we therapists, when dealing with a grandiose person, need to supply what's missing. See, you can nurture a grandiose person till the cows come home, and they won't change. They'll be happy, cozy therapy. You'll have a weekly annuity check, but you're not going to the person's not going to change. In order to get them to change, you have to supply. Here's how it goes. George Valiant once said there are two kinds of people in the world. This is way back when people smoked in public. There's a guy who walks into an elevator, gets claustrophobic, and turns green. There's a guy who walks into an elevator, lights up a big fat stogie, and everybody else turns green. That's the difference between shame and grandiosity, implosion. Shame-based people are in pain. Grandiose-based people are not in pain. The people around them are in pain.
It's beautiful.
Grandiose are in trouble. The pain is between them and their environment, which, by the way, to go back to it earlier, is how I became a couples therapist. I started off working with men, and particularly grandiose men. And I realized pretty quickly that I'd do a lot better if I brought the other people in the elevator into the room with me.
It's a much better reality check. You're going to get the full picture. Otherwise, you have to take with a grain of salt the story you're hearing. People only want to share what they want to share. It's not the full picture.
That's exactly. And I also believe that the cure for these personality issues and the cure for the trauma that underlies them is love, is relationship. The wound for girls, if you read the feminist literature, is disempowerment, the loss of voice. And the healing move, which the psychotherapy and feminism has done a great job with, is re-empowerment. The wound for boys and men is not disempowerment. Boys and men are falsely empowered. They're overly empowered. The wound is disconnection.
Yeah.
The wound to girls is adolescent, and around adolescence they lose their voice. You know when the wound to boys is?
About 5.
3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
By 3, 4, 5 years old, boys are reluctant to express their emotions. They still have them, but they know better than to bring them out. They've already read the code of hatred.
It takes just once, and that's the work that my fiance John does with men, is teaching them the skills of that awareness from how they're socialized in the man box culture, and it's pervasive in what we see in our work. And I could talk to you for hours, Terry, and I know that we're short on time, but I did have some questions that I want to be able to get to a handful of them. So maybe a brief responses, because I did put out on social media people who had questions for you, and I got beautiful responses. One of the things that I see a lot with my clients, and someone specifically asked, is how do we balance the individuality and relationality in partnership, right? That need for alone time, or someone who has come from enmeshed families where they are very fiercely protective of their individual sense of self. What would you say to those who are fearing, I might lose myself if I don't have my alone time, or I don't have my stronger boundaries, or too relational? What would you say is, I don't know that there's a right balance, but to someone who's afraid of losing themselves, but wanting to have a strong partnership all at the same time?
Well, it depends on where they're coming from. A lot of women tend toward boundarylessness, enmeshment. We were talking about it.
Hmm.
Have underlying issues with abandonment and lose themselves in their relationships. And they need to pull away and get better boundaries and have a stronger sense of self and not be so dependent on the relationship. There are other people who say, I need I need alone time because they're walled off and love avoided. It depends on what the speaker, where they're,
What the root
uh,
is.
where they're coming from. Um, if you're boundaryless, you need better boundaries. If you're walled off and it's all about me, you need to dissolve that boundary and
Hmm.
learn team. And it depends. I don't know if you ever watched the show Family Guy, but my kids used to watch it. And one day, Peter, the husband father unit, slams open the front door. I say this to an entitled guy, looks at his wife and kids and goes, I just spent 8 hours drinking beer and fishing with the guys. I need a little me time. So,
Yeah.
if I'm talking to a codependent woman who has lost herself in relationships, then yeah, you do need a little me time. If I'm talking to an entitled little boy who thinks that cleaning up the dishes is too much to ask of him, and no,
Right.
he needs a little we time. So there's no. It depends on who's asking the question.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, this was a great question. How can two people geographically apart in another country approach the work of relational repair after disharmony or cheating and cheating? Big question. When you're not in proximity.
Yeah. Well, um, it's the same process whether you're living together or whether you're far apart. Cheating is hard to come back from. Uh, Moving from disharmony to repair is the work of all couples all the time, but
Hmm.
it could be the disharmony of past assault. No, why are you being such a brat? To you cheated on me. I mean, those are very different scales.
Right.
If there's been infidelity, and if you're a long distance relationship, that might be a lot to bite off. You might want to think about Zooming with a couples therapist to help you on
Hmm.
that. But the long distance relationship means you're kind of on thin ice, and then the cheating on top of it is hard. If it were a lesser misdemeanor, I would teach you about repair, but you may need some help with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that would require a lot of extra transparency that, someone who is far away, especially the one who's done the cheating, might be hesitant to share where they're at every location. Here's what I'm doing. But that often is a way to form and build that trust that's one's hard to overcome. Okay, another one. This is says Shirley Glass wrote about creating windows and walls in our relationships to foster trust and fidelity. And yet Esther Perel says we cannot rely on our romantic partner for all of our emotional needs. I'd be curious how Terry sees the two ideas fitting together, how our relational partnerships honor friendships or close relationships outside their partnership.
I think that you must. I work with guys in particular around getting friendships.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Esther calls it the grand ambition of love, that the twosome will do what a whole village used to do,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a great strain on the pair. That you're. It's one thing to be your partner's best friend; it's another to be your partner's only friend.
True.
That's a lot of weight to bear. So spread it around, and I'm a big fan of rich friendships and rich social relations. If if you're with a friend and there may be some sexual attention issues, dilute them.
Hmm.
Uh, Bring the other person to dinner with you and your partner. Uh,
Right.
don't be so exclusive that you incite a lot of insecurity and jealousy in your partner. But I think we should have rich social networks, and not all of them have to be shared. In my marriage, Belinda has some girlfriends that I'm perfectly happy to not have to listen to, and I've got some friends who watch this.
Go have your time. It's all okay, honey. In the face of the psychedelic renaissance that's occurring, what's your thoughts on MDMA with couples therapy?
Great. In fact, I would like some of our RLT therapists to become expert. I think there's a great niche out there for somebody to grab to be the international expert on psychedelic assisted couples therapy. I think it would be fabulous. MDMA in particular is a
Yeah.
warm, loving drug, and people find themselves being able to tell the truth to each other in a loving way. One of the things I say is that under patriarchy, you can either be powerful or you can be connected, but you can't be both at the same time. At
Hmm.
MDMA, you can do both at the same time. It helps people find
Yeah.
that.
When I met you, John and I had just recently gotten back together after a short breakup, and MDMA was very helpful for us to be able to connect and have those really hard conversations with no flooding, no defensiveness. I describe it as like standing in a room and all four walls just come down, and now you're just there without the need for the defensiveness and the walls around you. I'm very excited about it. We're actually doing some psychedelic assisted therapy certifications to be able to do that work together because I see really beautiful benefits on the horizon for many people in their healing.
Yeah, great, great. I'm all for it.
So I'm going to finish up with a very quick story that I'm excited to share with you. So many years ago, on a drive up to Mendocino for a weekend away after a period of disharmony, John and I were listening to one of your, I don't know if it was a webinar or a podcast episode, and you were talking about how to be able to ask your partner the right question. If you want something from this, is it an invitation, a request, or a demand? And this is a tool that I've given a ton of my clients. I love it. We both really just valued how to really get clear on what you're asking. So a few weeks later, I had got invited to a bat mitzvah. I'm Jewish. He isn't. And I got the invitation and I said to him, hey, do you want to come to this bat mitzvah with me? And he goes, no. And I was super offended. And I was like, but you're my innate plus one. Like, what do you mean no? And I didn't say that. I just was thinking that. A couple of days go by and I really was like, oh, I asked the wrong question. I asked an invitation. I asked a yes, no question. I got a no. I should have been fine. That was the question I asked. So we're lying in bed one morning and I say to him, I said, I realized, the other day when I asked you about coming with me, I asked you the wrong question and I actually was really offended with the answer. And he knows exactly where I'm going with this. And he goes, you're about to ask a request, aren't you? Because he knew with the request, when I share why it was important to me and the value of having him be there, it would be really hard for him to say no. So he goes, we have a cap on how many requests per year you can have. It was hilarious, but it has been such a useful tool and a reminder that even two therapists in partnership have all the tools, have the education, have the knowledge, and yet still have a challenging time in able to enact them, which I'm sure you and your wife experience as well. We don't, I've had people say to me, Jory, when you and John broke up, like, how does that give any hope for the rest of us? It's like, well, we're still human with our wounds, our traumas, our, adopted child, our wise adults, our offline cortex. So it's easier said than done, right? Love isn't enough. It takes that loving confrontation and the awareness and the skills. So thank you so much, Terry, for all the work that you do. It's brought so much to my personal life, but such a basis for the work I do with others. And it really, really is beautiful. I really appreciate it.
Oh, bless you. That's a joy to hear. And if you're interested in learning more about the work, folks, come to my website. Relationallife.com, two L's, relationallife.com. We have a 2-year training program on how to do this. And but you can also take training a la carte. You don't have to sign up for the whole thing. And learn the skills, learn how to, what I call a relational technology.
Yeah.
How to do this in a more sophisticated way than mom and dad taught you.
And you know what? Mom and dad had no idea how to do this. It wasn't their awareness that generation. So we can't blame them either. That's one of the things people always say, but I didn't have a role model for this. Yeah, none of us did really, but we're aware now. So yeah, all those, your links will be in the show notes. And Terry, again, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really a pleasure having you on.
Blessings to you. Keep doing your good work.
Thank you so much.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat, visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.